Thank you, Honorable Senator Brakey. Well, he did my intro. I met Eric on the campaign back in 2012. We were both field staffers in Maine. We got to stay at his parents' cabin on the water in New Gloucester, so that was quite the introduction to Maine. I'm from Maryland originally, and soon after we took over the GOP with the success of the Ron Paul campaign, I was presented opportunity to work for the Marijuana Policy Project, which is one of the it's pretty much the premier, that and normal, cannabis reform organization that is really responsible for the majority of campaigns to make cannabis legal, whether that be medicinal or then adult use, 21 and up. So, why hasn't New Hampshire legalized already? Live free or die, right? Give me a break. Just kidding. I gotta rub it in a little bit because Maine sucks right now. I appreciate Senator Brakey's efforts in the Free State Project's efforts as a kind of break in case of emergency alternative for Mainers. So let's hear, does anybody have the number one reason why? That's a hint, the picture's a hint. Why we haven't legalized? Shout it out.
The Senate work.
It's a good answer.
No referendum.
That's right. New Hampshire does not have the citizens initiative process, a referendum process, where you can petition your government for change. And so I would suspect if New Hampshire did have that cannabis would have been legalized in 2016 along with Maine, along with Massachusetts. Vermont doesn't really have it either, but they did it through the legislature, and it's kind of a weird one, and I still don't know if they have stores yet. So, but we know on a lot of issues, including this one, that the people are ahead of the politicians. Whether it's an issue like gay marriage, for example, or this, there seems to be a 5-10 year kind of lag between the politicians that are ready to say they're for it and the initiatives that get passed before that. So these are two staffers. This was in Falmouth for 2016. We did our signature collection effort in-house, over 100,000 signatures. A lot of times these nonprofits or special interest groups will pay and have someone else do it, and they just deliver the signatures. And we did it in-house, and it was tough. So what are the freedoms that we have that you don't? In Maine, adults 21 and up can purchase cannabis at a store. They can be gifted it, they can grow it at home. We are allowed 6 plants, flowering plants per adult, 12 immature plants, and unlimited seedlings. There's also no cap on the household, so your partner, now that's 12. And you can also, some other cool parts about our home cultivation law is that you can grow for other people or they could grow for you. You have to, tag the plant with a driver's license if you want to be 100% by the books, but perhaps you live in the city but still want to, grow your own, so to speak. Your friend that lives in the country can grow your cannabis plants. So I think that Maine has the most robust home cultivation provisions in the country. So I'm going to jump around a little bit, but we have a timeline here to kind of set the stage for everyone. In the 70s, Maine actually decriminalized cannabis, so we're about 40 years ahead of you guys on the decriminalization front. I think part of that was the Jimmy Carter, and he brought it as an issue, and we were able to get that done in the 70s. And then 1999 was the first ballot initiative for medical cannabis, medical marijuana back then, but prefer to use the more scientific name less rooted in stigma, like marijuana. 2009, that got expanded. In 1999, it created the caregiver system where a small grower can grow for a limited number of patients. And back then, there was only a handful of conditions that you could get a card for. We've since expanded that to allow for any condition that your doctor thinks that cannabis could be of use. You can get that card for 1 year. So it was working, but it could have worked better. So my organization worked with locals in 2009 to expand that to create dispensaries, which is, the stores that you think of. So that initiative created 8 dispensaries, and there was some heartburn about that in the process in Maine, because 4 of the 8 went to a person from California, group from California that was doing it over there, and so they had experience, so that's why the state said, okay. But that was half of the licenses to an out-of-state entity, and Mainers, like Granite Staters, are immensely kind of protective of their turf and their state, and to see this new industry already slip through the fingers was tough for folks to swallow. So you had these 2 kind of parallel tracks in the medical cannabis program. You had, at the peak, 3,000 caregivers growing 30 plants for patients, and then you had these dispensaries. The dispensaries could grow unlimited, and they could serve patients as well, but there's only 8 of them. For a state that's big like Maine, it wasn't really workable, and so we felt, and caregivers felt, that we should expand that as well. So fast forward 2016, my organization tax regulate cannabis like alcohol. Wasn't super excited about the tax and regulate part of it, but I think being elected official, I wasn't then back then, but we don't live in philosophy, we live in reality, and we have to determine what is worth what. And I felt that a lot of folks would benefit from it. The cost our state uses to enforce prohibition was not a good use of tax dollars. It wasn't good for liberty. And so I personally felt that it was worth trading that the way it was drafted. If it was different, then maybe not, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We ended up passing it by about 4,000 votes, so very efficient campaign. But it took a while to get implemented because Governor LePage at the time, he's a Republican, wasn't really for it. So it took until about 2018. He was out of office. The legislature implemented a kind of a new version of the bill, and then it took to COVID for adult use stores to actually get up and running. So Maine was the slowest of the 5 states that legalized in 2016 to get those adult use stores online. It's been quite a saga especially for the medical community, starting back in 2013. I was working the adult use track, but still definitely in support of the medical, and seeing them in Augusta at the public hearings fighting against just dumb government things like, now they want your fences to be 8 feet instead of 6 feet. Well, my fence is 6 feet and it's done. Like, give me a break. We can protect our plants. We don't need your security mandates. And there was other silly things like I remember in 2014, Senator Brake, you remember as well, there was a bill to outlaw keef. Do you guys know what keef is? Some of you folks, all the pot smokers. Keef is the sticky crystals that are on the buds that stick to your fingers, or they fall off, or the bottom of your grinder, and they wanted to outlaw that part of it, but everything else was okay. So that would be like legalizing Cheetos, but Cheeto fingers would be against the law. Just dumb, right? Like, how do you make one part of the plant legal and not the other part? So we fought a lot of dumb things over the years, and they've worked hard to protect their program, to keep it a cottage industry, thousands of people growing, 30, 60 plants, serving their local communities, serving patients. We've gotten away from it a little bit, but there's a lot of people affected by medical cannabis, pediatric patients that use it for epilepsy, seizures. They were helped by this program immensely. And I think, if we went straight to legalization, we would lose some of that. And so the program matured, and the folks, I think people that grow cannabis are kind of anti-government to begin with, right? And so they definitely adopted a model of, who's going to stop me? You got to know the rules to break them, right? And so the caregivers were growing plants, and the plants that they yielded gave them too much cannabis to serve just their 6 patients that they were allotted. And so they couldn't even donate the excess at one point. We fixed that, but it still didn't make sense, the system. So what some enterprising caregivers did is they'd have 5 kind of permanent patients, and then they would keep the last patient slot open as a revolving patient slot, which thus allowed them to have patients for 10 minutes and then back to 5. And this didn't say anywhere in the rules that you couldn't do that. It didn't say how long someone had to be your patient. And
Don't say a dog can't play basketball.
so that was one example of knowing the rules, using them, and the law didn't prohibit them from doing that. What was the other big one? The caregiver storefronts as well. So all these caregivers, they were selling in parking lots, sometimes having people come to their home, sometimes going to people's home, but not great if you don't know the person. It's a new relationship. You're a patient. You grow a bunch of weed. You don't want strangers in your stuff. So the need for a caregiver storefront for stores, more stores in these 8 dispensaries, was growing year by year by year. And finally, a guy by Dawson Julia said, well, there's nothing in the law that says we can't have a store. So they created a caregiver storefront. He was the first one. They did the rotating patient slot and had people coming in, and it was just like a dispensary and just like any other store where you go and purchase things. And that definitely expanded the program. Senator Brakey was a big part of that. He was the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee that term, and he was able to negotiate with the dispensary owners and the caregivers because they hated each other. They saw each other as competition, and Senator Brakey was able to bring everybody to the table, gave some carrots for the dispensaries, gave some carrots for the caregivers, and ultimately these small businesses won and patients won. Lots more choice, lots more access. The price goes down as competition goes up, right? These are basic tenets of a free market. And it worked, parallel to cannabis being legal. Because it didn't get implemented, it was kind of good for the locals because the Interstate Commerce Clause prevents residency requirements. Even though it's federally legal, I think maybe you should, still get a little waiver. But so ultimately, it was a locals-only program for more years than it should have been. Whether that's the best economic policy or not, it helped people in my state. And I'm going to jump back to legalization because I think it was pretty interesting and shows our how we do it in the state. So that's me on one part of the plant. The other one with the guy with the beard is Paul McCarrier. He was a local caregiver. And the woman is Representative Diane Russell, who introduced legalization back in, I think, 2011, was one of the first states to do so and get a vote on that. So my organization brought signatures forward. We were clear that this was our plan to bring legal marijuana to the ballot in 2016. And, I was from away. I'd been there for 4, 5, 6 years at that point, but I'm a flatlander, so some of the local caregivers, wanted to do it their way, and it really wasn't that different when all things being equal, but for whatever reason, we wanted to fight it out. So we actually had 2 signature drives going concurrently for 4 or 5 months, and so going to a concert or a festival, and hey, will you sign my petition to make marijuana? I already signed it. Well, which petition did you sign? I don't friggin' know, there's a guy over there. And so ultimately we had to get T-shirts. Was it the guy in the blue shirt? And finally, we were able to convince them to come to the table. We had outside donors that didn't like us, fighting in the sandbox. And so we went with their language, and then they let us kind of quarterback the thing, and that helped. But there's definitely still going on today as far as locals fighting against bigger business and out-of-state business. We'll get into that as well. I did want to run through some numbers here. Oh, is that you or me? Full screen. Thank you. Cannabis is big business in Maine. We're right up there with, when you combine medical and adult use sales last year, we're pretty much right there with lobster. Lobster had a really good year. We're beating potatoes and blueberries heartedly. You could throw in dairy as well, and I think cannabis still wins. So with our two programs, they both brought in about medical and adult use this last year. They brought in about 250 million each, give or take a little bit on both sides. Of course, the tax revenue is different. Adult use is taxed higher, so it brought in a little more tax revenue. But, you know, put together, this is a $500 million industry for our state, and even some of our, you know, famous and legacy industries are dwarfed by it. But it's not all roses. This is some of the stuff that we're dealing with now, today. As Senator Brakey said, I'm on the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee that regulates cannabis, so it's like completely come full circle for me, going from collecting signatures to make it legal on the street to being around the horseshoe, regulating the thing I helped make legal. It's pretty humbling, pretty awesome, but also comes with a sense of kind of responsibility to the folks that did get into the industry and that are struggling right now. The overregulation from the state has been absolutely brutal. And we'll get into a little bit more of that. So Senator Brakey's colleagues, he couldn't convince them not to do an excise tax, unfortunately, back in 2018. There's a sales tax of 10%, and then there's an excise tax. The excise tax is at the cultivation level, and right now it's $335 per pound. That was supposed to represent another 10% back in the day, but price drops, competition goes up, and now that $335 represents a larger portion of the tax revenue. And it's so bad that the growers have to pay this excise tax. If they're vertically integrated, they have to do it if they move it to the other side of the warehouse to manufacture it into cartridges or edibles. So they're fronting the state money. It's crazy. They're all on payment plans with Maine Revenue Services. It's completely unsustainable. And explaining it to my colleagues, it'd be as if a lobsterman was catching and he comes back to the docks and the tax collector's there at the docks, and the tax man wants a third of your catch, of your catch, before you can get off the boat to even sell it. So it's really burdensome, and it's hard to get the state off of revenue. They wanted a flat thing, a flat amount, so they could predict it over time. It stays the same, even if the sales price goes lower, and it worked in that regard. And now they're addicted to it, and we had a revenue surplus in the last session. Couldn't do any reform on it. Now we're at a shortfall. We're definitely not going to do any reform about it. Testing is a big issue in the state. States mandate that you test your cannabis. Some of it, you could make an argument, makes sense, but it's gotten so expensive and so redundant that it doesn't today. You have to test for pesticides that maybe you don't use. We had recent guidance. They want us to test the pre-rolls after you roll it with the flower that was tested. And so that's an added cost every time. And unfortunately, we have a underground illicit market that has completely proliferated. And, you know, I'm not big on like being a narc or anything like that. And it's mostly victimless crime, but this is organized crime, specifically kind of Chinese triad-linked organized crime. They're growing out of residential houses in Maine, hundreds of them. Our governor's done nothing about it. It hurts the price, right? If they have no regulations, they don't have to pay taxes, they don't have to test. So now the price for them to grow is way less than everyone else. So I'm trying to convince my colleagues to make it easier on the people that are trying to follow the rules. That's the only way we're going to stop the illicit market. Eric ate into all my time. So it's just tough in general everywhere as far as cannabis. The banks charge you maybe $500 a month extra, and then at some of them at some point we're even charging you 1% on all deposits, and then like bothering you when they're looking at your books and saying, well, why didn't you deposit it? So really rough stuff. Tax deductions, you can't get 280E. federally. And then metric is this other thing where they've mandated this seed to sell software where you have to tag every plant with this, and you have to pay a tag, and it's plastic, it's not recyclable, and it's gotten so burdensome that I know one operator paid $30,000 in fees just to this private company. So they got the sweetheart deal, everyone paying into them. We have conflicts of interest with our director. I've initiated a government oversight complaint into this. They're actually investigating. They voted unanimously to look into these ties. So if I were to, I guess to say that there could be a New Hampshire advantage on cannabis. You guys somehow managed to have the state run your alcohol and still make it cheaper, so I don't know that I would put it past you that you could figure out weed before we do in Maine. So if you did want us to come over the border, this is what I would recommend you set up your program with. I know you have been contemplating it. No excise tax. Allow for vertical integration. The three-tiered system's dumb, right? That's alcohol. It came out of Prohibition. If you manufacture it, you can't sell it. If you distribute it, you can't do either of those. 3 separate systems. Cannabis is different. You can be vertically integrated. And so you can retail it, you can grow it, you can manufacture it. It's hard to be good at 3 things, but maybe you can. Or maybe you just want to grow it. Maybe you just want to retail it. Our law and your law should allow for that. We have a free market in Maine. We worked hard to not have as little barriers to entry as possible, so there's no caps for the state. That's a big thing. Other states have limited licenses. They get lawsuits, they fight over it, there's bribery, it's a mess. So low barriers to entry is better. Keep your medical program. We're always gonna have pediatric patients. We're always gonna have medicine that shouldn't be taxed. And there's also the dosage limitations. In Maine, adult use, you can only have a gummy worth 10 milligrams. And up to 200 in the package. But if you're a cancer patient and you need a high dose, you shouldn't have to eat 6 cookies when you don't have an appetite to get the medicine you need. So we need those high potent.
You can have another 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you, Senator. Very gracious, very gracious. Skip the software, the seed to sell software, the metric. They have a whistleblower lawsuit. They're the majority company in most of the states. There's a couple other ones that also do it. But it's a symptom of cannabis policy kind of 1.0 and this fear. It's like, okay, well, what if there's contamination? We need a recall. Well, great, we could do that. We don't mandate this single private company to do it for our vegetables or our beef. And that stuff can kill you when it's contaminated. I don't know, you could say the same for cannabis. So I don't know why we'd have these extra regulations. They're built out of fear. And I got 2 more slides here, so just in time. Don't forget the social clubs. That was part of our 2016 initiative. The politicians took it out, and now we still don't have any place to consume cannabis that's not your house. And meanwhile, 30 million people visit our state, and so we're just asking them to smoke weed in their hotel or while they're driving or in public parks. There's a way to do it, and there's a way to do it responsibly. That would definitely get people over the border. Perfect or the good? I just wanted to put this out here for y'all. How bad is it now? What are you willing to sacrifice to make cannabis legal? Are you willing to let the state have that monopoly to do it? Is it worth it? Maybe. I can't answer that for you. I think, personally, home cultivation is kind of my line in the sand. So if you have that right, that's a good backstop. But I, personally wouldn't settle for anything that didn't include home cultivation for you folks. And I would recommend that you don't have the government grow your weed, because that's what happens when they do. That's from one of Ole Miss, or one of the 2 colleges that have that federal contract to grow medicinal weed for research. And well, of course, you maybe wouldn't find any medicinal value if you're smoking that crap. So thanks, everyone. I'll be around if you have any questions, want to talk.